Alright everybody, here we go around the world again. This video is probably going to be a pretty long one. I actually have something to talk about in every single tank tonight. It's been a busy week. I've had a lot going on. Most of you probably know that I was dealing with Ick in my open top 20. We'll get to that when we get to it. But that was my prime focus this week, so I didn't do a whole lot until yesterday when I went on a water changing and tank maintenance rampage. So we'll go around the room and we'll look at each tank and I'll talk about what I did. This tank basically got a very, very minor water change and filter change. No big deal, just, same old. This tank always just sits here and ticks over. But I did do something to it. I did actually change the filters out, and I did do a minor, maybe 10% water change. So that was something done to this tank, and that's about it. But we did get to look at it, and we did get to talk about it. That's my 29 miscellaneous, and there's usually not a whole lot going on in that one. My Gourami tank, however, got a lot going on in here. I did a big water change yesterday, and I removed a lot of the floating water sprite. And I'm taking a new approach to the way I remove my water sprite. The way I used to do it was I would pull the big, what we will call the mother plants, out of there, and I would throw a bunch of the babies back in and let them grow and, get big and full and fill in the tank, and then I would start the whole process over. So what I've been doing now is I've been leaving the larger plants intact, and I've just been going through and I've been sorting the little rootlets and the little babies off. And here you can see a good example of some roots that are developing, and in time they will become established enough that they will be separate plants that I can gently just tease off of the main plant, and it will leave this branch intact and unharmed. But I'll be able to get rid of those smaller ones, and that'll allow me to keep the plant cover full but thin enough that it allows light to penetrate, and I'll actually get some better lighting down here in the bottom of the tank. You can see in here, I guess when we get to some other tanks you'll get to compare it, but if you take a look at the roots and how stringy they look, that's because the gouramis really enjoy munching on them and spend a lot of time up in those roots eating them. I think my loaches eat them too. Either the loaches eat the roots or they eat what's in the roots. You can see my gouramis up there thrashing around and tearing at the plants. So if you don't want plants that look like this, don't put gouramis in a tank with plants. Or if you do, then you're just going to have to accept the fact that you're going to have a very natural looking tank that has herbivorous fish in it, and they will put a hurting on your plants. So that's why the roots look like that in this tank. The other thing I've got going on is I moved some real estate around in here the other day, and it wasn't very much, but it was significant. And then this rock here, this white rock you can see on the corner, had actually dropped and fallen and didn't look like it was actually doing anything or giving any support to the rock above it, the flat rock. And when I went in there to take it out, just to open the tank up a little more, the whole corner sort of collapsed and fell down. So I realized that that rock actually is in there supporting it. So I adjusted it, I tucked it back up in there a little bit tighter. Sorry for all this glare. So I actually now have a little more room through here. The water flows through much more freely. I can actually see the detritus picking up and moving now. And my striped Raphael can move through there a little more easily. I also removed, I'm trying to do this duck walking. I also removed a large rock that was in there that actually, believe it or not, does allow for the passage of water to move through there much more freely, and you can see the detritus kick up as the fish swim through there. So those are two significant changes in this tank that don't look like much, but really did make a difference in the way the animals are behaving and the way the water's moving around in the tank. So I'm definitely going to have to keep my eye on whether or not maintenance needs to get picked up a little more frequently or whatever. We're going to have to keep an eye on how the water change, the flow through the tank is affecting the overall conditions in the tank. So moving on to the Angelfish tank. This is another one. Again, sorry, this one's kind of hard to stand in front of because of the table in my way. This one has just had some basic maintenance done to it. I got in there and did a pretty big water change. I pulled some of the floating water sprite out as we just discussed in the previous tank. This one you can really see what I'm talking about with the roots. Look how fuzzy and thick and lush those roots look. And this is a tank that does not have fish in there chowing on the roots all day, and that's what you get with these roots. So I did the water change. I actually got in this tank and did a big filter change, or just cleaned out the canister filter and got that all nice and done up. And I'm not sure what happened, but my temple plant right here went haywire, and all the foliage from there down just melted over a period of about 3 or 4 days and just turned to goo. So I had to get in there with my gravel vac and siphon it all out, and I just basically slurped all of the gooey remains of the leaves out, and I wound up sucking a bunch more crud off the bottom. I'm still working on getting that stuff out of here. I'm probably ultimately going to work on getting most of this white sand out of here. I really don't like it. This is one of the first tanks I set up, and I thought that white sand would look really cool, and I just hate it. I've never liked it, and it's just kind of in there, and I don't have a whole lot of choice about it at this point, but we'll see. Other than that, nothing, really concerned in this tank. Nothing else going on with the fish, or no new inhabitants or anything. But really strange the way those plants just sort of melted from halfway up. Everything there down just melted and turned into goo over a period of about 3 or 4 days. Don't know if that's part of the cycle of the temple plant or what. I've also got some pretty good news. If you look in there at this Anubias plant, it's actually sending off another runner in a completely different direction, so I could probably get in there and cut that whole leg of it off. But if you look in there at it closely enough, you can see it's a pretty big main root body. That big mass of Anubias is all one plant that's been growing onto the same piece of wood for about 2 years now, and then that big mass is all one big mass of Java that's been growing on the same piece of wood for about 2 years now. I tied them on when I first set this tank up, and they've hung on through thick and thin and are still looking like that after all this time. So this is one of my older tanks. It does go way back, and that's why it looks a little odd and a little different than my other tanks. This is when I was still kind of getting my feet under me and sort of deciding what my style was and what I liked and didn't like. So I definitely found out I don't like that white sand. Moving on to the T-bar tank. I really did a big water change on this tank yesterday, and you can see how crystal clear the water looks now. And I don't mean clear in the sense of any detritus floating around in the water, although I gotta say it does look pretty good in that sense at the moment. But it's clear in the sense of the tannin removal. I just didn't realize how much tannins were building up in there until I did a big water change on it, and it is just so bright and pretty in there now. I love it. The temple plant in the middle here is growing up and over and getting so big, it's really just kind of becoming problematic along the surface there. So I'm probably going to get in there and remove a little bit of that. See, now you get a little bit of look, if I can keep the glare off the tank, you get a little bit better look at his colors when he gets underneath of that 10,000K tube I put in there. He really just pops, and all the fish just light up really well now that I've got that 10,000K tube in here. So I got a little bit of video of my black ghost knife fish in this tank the other day. He's been taken to hiding in the cave system over to the left at night, and then when I turn the lights on in the morning, he darts out and he comes back over and he gets into this cave system here front and center there where he hides during the day. And I think that's because this T-bar harasses him, and the T-bar can't really get to him when he's down in these caves, but it can get to him when it's over in this cave. So at night he goes over there when the T-bar is asleep, and then in the morning he switches back over to his daytime hiding place. But I have actually gone in, and you can now actually see all the way through these caves. I know it's a little difficult between the glare and the plants and everything else, but you can actually see through that cave all the way to the back of the tank now. When I was in there doing a little bit of maintenance, I propped a few rocks up, and if you see that white rock on the bottom, I actually propped that cave up to make it much more spacious. So again, I've got more water flow. The fish will be able to swim through there a little more freely. All the way around, it makes for a much more open, better tank. This is a tank I designed when I first was getting started. I was really enthusiastic. I really wanted the tank to look natural and beautiful, which I pulled off nicely, I think. However, I had very little experience at actually maintaining a tank and cleaning a tank, and this tank is not well designed for keeping clean. It's got little detritus traps everywhere, little backwaters and eddies and slow spots and everything else. So it's a challenge to keep clean, and it's a challenge to maintain, but I honestly wouldn't have it any other way. I absolutely love the way this tank looks. I can sit here and look at this tank all day long. So unfortunately, moving on, we got a lot of ground to cover. This is my 20 long open top, and this is the tank that I recently had an outbreak of ick. I really don't feel like going into a lot of discussion about that in this video, because I'm going to do some more video that really talks in depth about what my experience was with this. But in short, I bought some neons. I put them in quarantine. I did not pay enough attention to them when I moved them from quarantine, and I brought some ick over on their gills, apparently, because it was not very apparent on the outside of their bodies. Even when the tank was fully infected, I saw very little of it on the neons themselves. But unfortunately, I did not find it until the ick was bad enough that my plecos that are living on the bottom were just absolutely covered in it, and as a result of my inattention, I wound up losing one of the plecos. I guess its gills were just so completely covered it just couldn't, exchange gases anymore, and I wound up losing that pleco. And then I opted to go for a heat treatment rather than a medication treatment, just because I wanted to shoot a series of videos on how to do it using heat. And of course I failed to do any research beforehand, and the fish that was in there, my rainbow fish, was not capable of withstanding the temperatures I rose to, and it died after about 4 or 5 days at 90 degrees. So as far as the ick treatment went, that went off without a hitch and right on schedule. The spots cleared up when I expected them to. Everything went fine, and no fuss, no muss. Ick, again, is just a nuisance. But I didn't do the research on how to treat on certain fish, and of course I found out later that the one fish just wasn't capable of handling those temperatures. So that was my fault. It was no problem with the treatment itself. It was just a problem. I should not have used that particular type of treatment with that fish in the tank. So that was my fault that I lost that Madagascan rainbow fish. And as much as I didn't like that fish, I kind of had a love-hate relationship with it, but this tank really does seem empty with it not in there, so I kind of miss it, and that's a bit of a bummer. But live and learn. That's a new experience for me, and I will definitely be doing my research before I go cranking the temperature up in any tank again. I'm going to make sure all the fish in that tank can handle those temperatures. So look forward to video on that. I haven't actually shot it yet, but I'm going to do my follow-up video real soon and wrap up my discussion about ick with that one. So my Brackish tank, my problem child, you can see all of that red slime bacteria is back. I've been getting in there and vacuuming it out. I've done 2 or 3 treatments with the red slime treatment. It just keeps coming back. I cannot get it out of this tank. I don't know what to do about it anymore. So rather than keep fussing with it, what I think I'm going to do is just keep dealing with it the way I am. It's not hurting anything, but one day I will just be motivated and I'll get in there and I'll really clean the tank out. So what my goal is, and I'm not setting any kind of time frame for this, like I just explained, it'll sort of happen one day when I'm ready for it to happen, just spur of the moment. But what I'm going to do is get in there and just remove everything. I'm going to suck all the gravel out of the bottom with a siphon. I'm going to remove all of those rocks. I'm going to remove the floating plants, just take everything out of the tank. And completely scrub it down and strip it down, and I may even give it another treatment of bacteria control, the red or the green slime, and just bomb the tank and start over, and that way it'll be basically a fresh new tank without actually changing tanks. And I really think at this point this is the only way I'm going to be able to get this cyanobacteria out of here. If you look at it, you can clearly see it's very live, healthy, growing, active cultures in there. You can see all the little bubbles underneath of it. Those bubbles are a result of photosynthesis. The gas exchange is happening underneath and can't get out. And actually, let me get a little razor blade in here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. This stuff is like sheets. I'm trying to look at my phone and do this rather than what I'm actually looking at. So it just comes off in chunks like that, and if I get a siphon in there, it siphons right up off the rock without problem. And then you wind up with with this really nasty foul stuff. Well, I was going to show it to you over another tank, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to drip it in the tank. So you sit tight, I'm going to get rid of this and we will be right back. Alright, I wish I had thought that through before I attempted to show you that, but I'm glad I did because that was a good example of what that red slime cyanobacteria looks like. It really does come off in sheets. The thing I hate most about it is it just stinks to high heaven. It smells like, it's hard to explain what it smells like. Imagine the stink of patchouli and then think of like an old wet carpet that's been stored in a musty basement. And you're in the neighborhood at that point of what it smells like. It's really nasty, and even without disturbing it like I did, and of course the room just reeks of it now, but even without it being disturbed, my basement just smells like that cyanobacteria. I can smell that when I walk in the room. So it's really foul, it's really nasty, and I'm really tired of it being in that tank. So we're about to really, do something to really get that cleaned out of there once and for all. But that'll be, again, when the mood strikes me, I'll just do it, and suddenly there'll be a video about it. So moving on to my quarantine tank. This tank is interesting now. I have a long-finned white-tip bristlenose pleco that was in the 20 long open top when I started the heat treatment. And after the 4th day, when I was going to turn the heat treatment down, again, see the video about the heat treatment and you'll understand what I mean by turning the heat down, the pleco in there was suffering. So I pulled it out, I put it in this tank that is actually room temperature, and it's been doing fine ever since. However, I don't know what to do with it now. It didn't go through the full treatment, so in theory, the 4 days at 90 degrees should have killed any ick that it was carrying. But I don't really want to take the chance on simply putting it back into the tank without it having gone through, I just don't want to take the chance on reintroducing it into the tank. So what I think I'm going to do is treat this tank with Paragard. Part of what the video I'm going to be shooting is going to be all about is the lesson I've learned about just simply treating all new incoming fish for parasites in general. And one of those things is going to be to simply just treat my quarantine tank with Paragard when I get new fish in it. So I can actually begin with this fish. I've ordered the Paragard, I'm waiting for it to show up, and I will go ahead and treat this fish, and then that way, whether it was clear or not, I'll know it was clear, and then I can actually remove this and safely put it back into whatever tank I'm going to move it to. So that's what's going on with the quarantine tank. And moving on to the Gudgeon tank. This one got a big water change and a glass, wiping and the filter change and so on and so forth. But again, that's all. No changes in the inhabitants or anything like that. I'm really on the fence with this tank. I really don't know what to do. I really want to do another native tank. I had a lot of fun with that. And the only way I could really do another native tank is if I reestablish this one, which was my native tank. If I just set it back up as another native tank, I really can't get another tank in this room. It just simply wouldn't fit. So the only option I really have for doing another native tank would be to reestablish this one as a native tank. So that means I would have to do something with the Gudgeons, either sell them or put them in another one of my tanks, and there's not another tank I have that I can imagine putting these Gudgeons in that wouldn't just completely ruin the tank. So that's not really an option. That's also really expensive sand in there. I've got about $70 in the sand, $65 in the sand. I don't want to simply just discard that or put it in a bucket and keep it somewhere until I want to use it again. I'd have to pretty much start this whole tank over. All those plants in there would have to come out. It wouldn't be a native tank for me if I left it like this, but then put some native fish in it. That would be just a really oddball sort of tank. If I do another native tank, it's going to look like a native tank. It's going to have rocks and sticks and branches, and it's going to look like, the habitat that my native fish would be in. It's not going to look like this with black sand and lush vegetation. So I'm really on the fence. As much as I want to do a native tank again, I really don't want to strip this tank down and start over. And as much as I don't really do much with these Gudgeons, and you hardly ever see them except when I do these videos, I really kind of like them in their own way, and I don't really want to get rid of them either. So again, just kind of on the fence, and I don't really know what's going to happen. But cross your fingers, maybe someday in the near future we'll be looking at another native tank. And I guess in the beginning of the video I lied because I haven't done anything to my snail tank this week. So if you want to count that, then no, my snail tank is just sitting there being a snail tank, and that provides snails for my puffer fish. Last and certainly not least is my 125, so we'll get back here and try to get the whole tank in for a moment. So that's it, that's the whole 125. What I did in here this week was about a 30% water change and a nice big wiping down of the glass, and I got everything all nice and cleaned up and went in and, you know, groomed a few little plants here and there, and I didn't do a whole lot else. No changes in inhabitants or anything like that either. One of the things I did want to point out while I was in here, we're looking at this tank. This is the tank that I have been most actively working on allowing the mother plant, so to speak, to develop and removing the smaller babies. And I'm even trimming some of the branches. This branch, for example, was getting a little too gangly at the end, so I cut the end off. And the branch back there was growing too directly into my spray bar, so I've trimmed that back. But for the most part, I only have these main branches now, and all of the little rootlets and little babies have been pulled out of there, and it allows me to have a much more full coverage across the top of the water without really blocking too much of the light. And I wind up getting this nice natural effect of some dapple light in the bottom, without being so dull that the plants don't get enough and the fish aren't visible or anything else. I did just get a little bit of video of my Tenopoma right there this morning. He was taking a nap wedged in his the filter intake. He likes to get wedged in between the filter and the surface skimmer. And then of course that is my Synodontis Eupteris. He's just kind of doing his thing. And then my other key fish in this tank that I think about as being the key fish in this tank is my snakeskin gourami. So that's pretty much it. We'll call that around the world. Let me get back over here again and we can wrap it up. So that's back where we started. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and do so. I got a lot of stuff coming up. You don't want to miss my follow-up video about the Ick. And if you haven't checked them out already, go look at my Not Necessarily How-To playlist or my 20 Long Open Top playlist, and you'll get my earlier videos where I discuss the treatment process itself. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you real soon on the next one.